Today I want to talk about mindset, the mindset for success in language learning. Now you may be aware of the book, The Growth Mindset, but I'm going to get into something more than just a growth mindset, and I'm going to refer to the Taoist or Taoist philosophy of Zhuangzi. Now the reason I got into this whole discussion is I was sitting in my car. Of course now we have podcasts, so in my car when I'm driving anywhere I'm listening. So I was listening to the Persian language podcast, which I'm following, which is very interesting, and I will be providing links to it if you're learning Persian. Parse, and he has this series on the roots of morals or morality in Persian, of course. So my understanding comprehension is not 100%, but it's still fascinating. And he, of course, talks about the evolutionary origins of our morality and the morals or the behavior of animals, chimpanzees. And so I'm learning all these things. And one of the great joys of language learning is that you can learn about things of interest to you while learning the language, which is what I'm doing with Parse. And when I'm in the car listening to podcasts, I go to Spotify, where I originally found Parse, and I find this podcast discussion between Jordan Peterson and Mark Andreessen, who is one of these tech guys, very wealthy person from California. And they're, appalled at the woke mobs, which in many ways I sympathize with. And of course they exaggerate in what they're saying. But Jordan Peterson goes on about how we should be guided in our behavior by the canons of Western thought, and he refers primarily to English language authors like, I can't remember who, Shakespeare, Chaucer, maybe John Stuart Mill, or Jungian psychology, or Dostoevsky. And one of the concepts and mindsets that I've always held to be very important in language learning is a certain degree of cultural weightlessness. So if you want to speak like a Frenchman, or if you want to speak like a Chinese person, you have to somehow get out of the fact that you are, in my case, an English-speaking Canadian, that you actually want to get into that culture, get into that other set of, behavior and the language, of course. So if we take this attitude of cultural weightlessness, then we say, why is Jordan Peterson so fixated on Western thought and Western religion? If we look at the world, say, and I'm going to refer to Zhuangzi, the great Taoist philosopher whom I don't fully understand, but I find interesting. He lived about 300 BC. At that time, 300, 500 BC, the bulk of the population of the world lived in Asia. China, in India, and even in Central Asia. I mean, the Persian Empire at that time was 30 to 50 million people. I mean, even in Central America, there were 10, 15 million people, apparently. I don't know, I wasn't there to count them. But it's important to take a step back from your own culture when analyzing human behavior, because human behavior is not just a matter of your little tribe somewhere or cultural in-group. And of course, when I follow Parse's podcast in Persian, and he talks about the extent to which, empathy and moral rules have existed in the animal kingdom to some extent. Even birds can sympathize with each other. When we consider that the Neanderthals are our cousins, not our ancestors, but our cousins, and that they wandered the world for 250,000 years before Homo sapiens, left Africa. So we have to have a certain amount of humility in making statements about what is moral behavior, to suggest, as Dostoevsky does, that if we don't believe in God, therefore there is no morality. Well, all the people who came before the Bible was written, those people had morals too. They had some kind of moral conduct, rules of behavior that worked for whatever society they were in. So we need to have that kind of detachment. And with that, I said, let's look at Zhuangzi's teaching and how that influences us when it comes to language learning. And of course, Zhuangzi represents this wu wei, like in other words, effortless approach to achieving a lot. And in particular, I'd like to refer to 4 of his very famous parables. And any of these things that I refer to, you can check up on ChatGPT, which is a wonderful tool for getting sort of a shortcut to at least a superficial knowledge of a variety of things. And I've mentioned before that ChatGPT works a bit like language learning. In other words, it's this sort of massive input of information, some degree of predicting what's going to come, sort of iterative error correction, whereby gradually we get a sense of the relationship between facts, or the relationship, in the case of language, between words and structures and how a language works. So it's a bit of a parable itself with language acquisition. But let's get back to Zhuangzi's parables. The first parable that I would like to refer to is the parable of the crooked tree, which I used in my book, The Linguist on Language. I even had a crooked tree on the cover. And the gist of it is that if you follow your interests, if you respect your personality as an individual, then you may be a crooked tree, which for the carpenter in Zhuangzi's parable, the crooked tree is not very good for making furniture or for building homes, but it follows its own personality. And maybe because it's crooked, the wood chopper won't chop down that crooked tree because it doesn't want it. But it's important to follow your natural instincts and follow your personality. So that was the parable of the crooked tree, which I took as a metaphor for language learning. You got to follow your interests and not be guided too much by rigid rules of grammar, for example, or tests or other things that people submit you to. Just follow your own interests and you will acquire the language. So in the sense of relax, enjoy, and accept, the crooked tree is the first parable that I'd like to refer to. The second parable that I also referred to in a book is Zhuangzi's parable of the fish trap, where he says, we need fish traps to catch fish. Once we have the fish, we don't need the fish trap. We need, words for meaning. Once we have the meaning, we no longer need the words. What he's saying is, and this applies to language learning, the main thing is the meaning. So if you're working your way through a text, as I do on Link, and I look up words and I find a dictionary definition, which I forget, like Zhuangzi throws away the fish trap, it doesn't matter. I am delving into and getting into the meaning of the text, as I do in my Persian podcast, which I read and look up words, talking about the roots of morality and so forth and so on. I'm totally immersed in the meaning, and I'm oblivious to the fact that I'm looking up words and forgetting words. It doesn't matter. Gradually, my ability in the language is improving because I am relaxed, I'm enjoying it, I'm engrossed in the meaning of what I am reading or listening to. The next parable, which I again would encourage you to look up, is Zhuangzi's parable of the butcher, who is effortless in the way he butchers the meat, and he knows exactly where the joints are, and he's done it so often that it's just one fluid, effortless motion. And that's the state that you want to achieve in your language learning. You aren't trying to refer to rules of grammar, trying to remember. You've just heard it so often, you've read it so often, you've used it so often that gradually these things become second nature. And so you are, in fact, learning and growing in the language in an effortless way. And of course, it is a process of, as with ChatGPT, iterative error correction. So I'm sure the odd time the butcher hits, a sinew, and therefore then gradually, the more he continues doing it, he has a natural sense of the best where to place his cuts when he's butchering the meat. And finally, the fourth of Zhuangzi's parables is the parable of the butterfly, where Zhuangzi had a dream that he was a butterfly, and then when he woke up, he no longer knew whether he was a butterfly who thought he was Zhuangzi, or Zhuangzi who thought he was a butterfly, who had thought he was a butterfly. So here again, it gets back to this idea of cultural weightlessness. When I am with speakers of another language, I try to have the feeling that I don't know if I am an English-speaking Canadian, if I am a Persian speaker, and I can get myself immersed into their culture, and I can also flutter above, so I don't have to be anchored in the Western canon or into any particular cultural tradition. I am out there fluttering about, enjoying whatever language I want, whatever cultural tradition I want, placing equal weight, let's say, on Omar Khayyam or Zhuangzi, or the great philosophers of Central Asia. Again, I would use ChatGPT to look up the list of the amazing philosophers, mathematicians, scientists, Muslim scientists of Central Asia between, the year 800 and the year 1200 or whatever. So this butterfly image of cultural weightlessness is also one that I enjoy. So we end up with these sort of four elements of a mindset, which is relax, enjoy yourself. Don't worry about how well you're doing. Don't take tests. Don't, allow people to criticize you. Don't criticize yourself. Just relax. That's the R. The E is enjoy. I enjoy my Persian podcasts about from Parsi, and I keep looking for content that I'm going to enjoy. It's very important to me that in order that I can continue with my language learning, I have to enjoy what I'm doing. So E is enjoy. A is accept. Accept the mistakes. Accept when you forget. Accept the sense very often that we aren't progressing. Believe that you are progressing. I accept that I'm progressing. I just spoke with my Persian tutor. I don't think I'm doing well. She said, you've really improved. Accept that you're improving as long as you're enjoying what you're doing. And then finally, be determined to succeed. In other words, persevere. You have to stay with it. You have to believe that you're going to get there. Sometimes that's difficult to do because the progress is not obvious. But if you have that mindset that you're determined to succeed, and you have the other three elements, relax, enjoy, accept, and you're determined to succeed, you will succeed. So that's my little diatribe today on mindset for success. And in my next videos, I'm planning them out now. I'm going to be talking about the importance of reading. I'm going to be talking about revisiting a language like, say, Persian, which I left for 6 months while I focused in on Turkish, and what I do when I come back. But I'm also open to suggestions. So if you would like to hear me talk about some other subject, please let me know. All right. Thank you for listening. Bye for now.